Colleagues, I want to bring this meeting to order, and pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the study of Canada's Development Finance Initiative, and as per the request of the committee, I'd like to welcome Minister Marie-Claude Bibeau, who's the Minister of International Development and La Francophonie. So, Minister, welcome to the committee. And with the Minister is Diane Jacovella, Deputy Minister, International Development. Diane, welcome to you. And Elisa Goldberg, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy. So, colleagues, we have an hour, and we'll try and stick to our time frame. And we want to turn the floor over to the Minister for her opening remarks, and then we'll go, as per usual, straight into questions. So, Minister, I want to turn the floor over to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm very pleased to be appearing here before you today to discuss the DFI. As we all know, in 2015, the International Committee adopted a new series of Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, ODD in French, in order to continue our fight against poverty and inequality. So it's always important to bear this in mind. The goal of our new feminist policy and our goal for sustainable development are tied to the fight against poverty. These new goals are based on the idea that all parties and resources pertaining to development must be mobilized. We know that the official development aid has made important gains over the past few decades, but it is clear that the resources in the public sector all by themselves will not enable us to meet these goals by 2030. This is where this private sector comes into play, and it has been recognized, including with the program that was established in Addis Ababa in 2015, that this private sector drives the economic growth. Moreover, economic growth is also a guarantee of greater stability and security in developing countries. The involvement of the private sector is essential to obtain tangible results with respect to development in order to bring as many people out of poverty as possible. This is where the new Development Finance Institute can play a role. The member countries of the G7 and many members of the OECD have development finance initiatives in place for many years now, and they support companies that want to invest in developing countries. They provide the funds necessary to establish and develop their commercial activities. These funds are not available to those who work in traditional finance services. In addition to supporting economic growth in developing countries, it has been shown that the DFI can successfully support our priorities when it comes to international development. In Canada, the consultations that we've held on international aid show that the Canadian stakeholders support expansion of opportunities provided in these countries. The new policy of feminist international assistance reflects our commitment to work more closely with the private sector.
Joined Prime Minister Trudeau to announce the establishment of Canada's own Development Finance Institute, which will be headquartered in Montreal and operate as a subsidiary of Export Development Canada. My officials are working closely with EDC to launch the DFI's operations by January 2018, with an initial capitalization of $300 million. The DFI aligns with our new feminist international assistance policy. It will be an important tool, to reduce poverty, advance women's empowerment, and foster green, inclusive economic development. This approach is unique and will distinguish us from other development finance institutions in the world. Its success will be measured by its ability to generate long-term development results while becoming financially self-sustaining over time. The Board of Directors will have the experience and expertise needed to help the new DFI deliver on its mandate. The DFI will also be supported by an advisory council who possess expertise on international development and finance. Moreover, day-to-day operations will be led by a managing director with the development financing expertise. It will draw on a full range of instruments such as debt, equity, and guarantees. And to achieve financial sustainability in a reasonable time frame, it will build a diversified portfolio that balances both risks and returns to have the greatest impact in the field while ensuring its sustainability. The DFI will also develop a decision-making framework guided by the government's clear direction to focus its work on high-impact sectors to maximize development opportunities. The DFI's framework will ensure that its impacts are real and measurable. To do this, we are emphasizing the need to work with small and medium-sized enterprises to reach the poorest and most vulnerable in countries eligible for ODA. Le nouvel institut accordera la priorité aux activités.
The new institute will prioritize those activities pertaining to climate change, clean energy, the agri-food sector, infrastructure, including those sectors pertaining to the management and treatment of water. The financial services and companies led by women and youth will be also given priority. Finally, since the impact of such an investment on development depends on the success of our projects, the Institute will review the potential for long-term success of each initiative that it supports. Global Affairs Canada will provide technical assistance in order to maximize the positive impact on development, particularly with respect to the results linked to equality. And in order to accelerate these companies, the Canada, including the trade, commercial trade service, will be participating. Finally, but not, the Institute will also adopt a framework for social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, which will reflect the exemplary practices of other DFIs.
Development efforts, but ODA will continue to be critical to building inclusive and sustainable growth in developing countries. As a minister, I want to use Canada's leadership and all other levers at my disposal to leverage more resources for development. Thank you. Now I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Minister, and I'll go straight to questions. Mr. Bouclier, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Minister for inviting me to Anga for 3 days, being there around her meetings, and it was a good start for me under this new portfolio I have. And I guess the initiative that on DFI was started under our previous government, previous Conservative government, and we see now that this $300 million remain in place. The first question, where the $300 is going to come from?
Well, I'm sorry, where the $300 million is going to come from? Did I get your question correctly?
Where is the $300 million budget is going to come from?
It's within EDC capitalization, so it doesn't have to come from the ODA envelope, so it's within EDC already.
Okay, so you've got goals, you've got priorities. We know that going into encouraging the private sector, it's a good idea for sure to partner on project and development project across the world, and you set your priorities already based on certain criteria that you already set as your goal to achieve or to participate on those projects. How the Canadian private sector is going to be encouraged more, where the finance minister already suggesting some tax measures that is going to really put extra levies on the businesses and is going to make it harder and less competitive for our private sector to compete. So how the Canadian private sector is going to compete and is going to be encouraged while the tax proposed by the finance minister is going to be a roadblock?
First, I don't agree with the context of your question, but I focus on answering concerning development and the DFI. So since we have taken the decision to build the DFI within EDC, It will be an opportunity for us to benefit from the network of EDC in Canada and abroad, and to benefit not only from their products, their financial products, but also from their network. They already have an important private sector network, so it will be easier to reach out and to share business opportunities in developing countries to these enterprises, businesses who are already doing business overseas.
Okay. ODC is for-profit body or business, let's call it. Is DFI going to be profitable? Is it going to be for-profit too?
Absolutely. All the DFIs, are profitable at the end, but the idea, it's not a private financing institution. Making profit is not the ultimate objective. The idea is to balance between financial sustainability and having the biggest impact in the field. So they will have to develop a diversified portfolio and to take reasonable risks. Obviously, it's not private. They have to take a certain level of risk, but they have the experience. And since, just to give you an example, in 2000, the investment through DFIs globally was $10 billion. In 2014, it was $70 billion. Just to give you an example that how this way to invest in developing countries, to stimulate investment in sharing the risk, is definitely a good channel, since we can see that from our experience and our...
Speaking of risk, we have a private sector that is going to invest, and we have DFI as a body that is going to monitor and open the door. Who's going to take the full risk? Is the private sector or the DFI?
So we will have, with the DFI within the EDC once again, and also with our commercial, les délégués commerciaux, delegates, trade commissioners across the world, we have this experience, expertise, knowledge of what is the reasonable risks, or who are the trusted partners in the field. So we have obviously take a bit more risk than a fully private institution, but still the idea is to be financially sustainable and to even capitalize more, to be able to reinvest in development. So we will find the right person to manage, to support and accompany, to make sure that at the end of the day, with a diversified portfolio, we will make it will be sustainable, and we will be able to increase the capitalization through the years.
Okay, $300 million. It sounds a lot of money, but really, going into development and going into this route of business is not big. How are you going? What's your strategy to stretch on the $300 million to go for longer term? Because again, 5 years is a short term. So what's your strategy on stretching on $300 million?
Well, $300 million is definitely a good start to be able to implement the structure, to get experience, to see where our strengths and our weaknesses and how we can improve, and then to see and have the discussion on what learn lessons and find the best ways to improve or to strengthen and even increase the capitalization through the years. So it's kind of a startup, and we will adjust through the years.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boutieff. Now we'll go to Mr. Levitt, please.
First of all, good morning, Minister. Good to have you here before our committee, and this is obviously an issue that we looked at back in the spring, but we're certainly happy to have your expertise on the subject here today. I want to start with a couple of more general questions. How will Canada's Development Finance Institute distinguish itself from other DFIs? We heard reports of other DFIs and analysis, the UK, the US, but how is the Canadian version going to distinguish itself, particularly in terms of the return on investment of the $300 million initial capital?
Thank you. Well, our DFI is linked with the Feminist International Assistance Policy. So we have given orientation to the board of EDC and the board of DFI to come, and that we want the projects that we will support to have an impact on our areas of priorities that you can find in within the policy. So obviously, economic empowerment will be a significant element that we want to look at. Empowering or economic empowerment of youth as well, business, creating jobs and developing entrepreneurship with youth is also a priority. In terms of sectors of activity, everything related to climate change. So it could be agribusiness, green technologies, green energy, water. These are sectors of activity that we want to focus on because we think it's the right thing to do to increase, to foster the economy. But as well, we have in Canada the expertise in these sectors that we can share in developing countries and that we want to bring Canadians to engage in developing countries.
Thank you. You mentioned Export Development Canada, EDC. What is the advantage of having the DFI as a subsidiary of EDC? Why not set up a separate independent body as other jurisdictions have done?
Yeah, our team investigate on that and looked at different ways or how we can, establish the DFI. And the recommendation was to go through within EDC. First, they already have the overseas and international investment expertise, so their team are qualified. They already have all the financial products available. So it's much easier for us than to have to reinventer la roue all over again. So, and I think in terms of cost effectiveness, it's also a good decision to not start over again and build a full, complete, support team while we already have experts available, those from EDC and obviously working with our trade commissioners in the different embassies.
Thank you. I want to move now to a question on project life cycles. We know that development projects can take a fair amount of time before they can provide evidence of impact. How will Canada's DFI be able to demonstrate impact in what really is a very few short years? Do you have any particular ideas that are going to be used in the beginning as possibly pilot projects or shorter projects that may be able to kind of prove the intent of the DFI in a relatively short period of time?
Yes. Well, the DFI board is working, well, the board is not there right now, but I mean, the team is working on developing a result framework. This is one thing. To have impact and results in the short-term period, we can also partner with maybe other DFIs who already started a discussion on different projects. So this is a possibility to be able to start quickly and managing the risks as well, sharing the risk in the beginning with other organizations. So we are looking at different ways to start quickly and efficiently.
Do I have time for one other question? Well, I'm certainly in favor of a Canadian DFI. I'm wondering about the impact that we can have with a $300 million investment. As my colleague across the way said, it's not a lot of money when we're talking about these kind of projects. How does that amount compare to other DFIs that have been out there and more established for a while? And how will that impact the approach that we're taking?
Okay. To give you example, Swedish, 400 million US. And Swiss, 600 million. So we're not, I mean, we're starting.
Right.
And I'm very open, and I hope this will be a success, and I'm confident it will be a success, and that we could consider recapitalization when the time comes. And then, a few years later, I'm also hopeful that the DFI itself will generate revenues and increase its capacity to reinvest in other new projects.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt. Monsieur Aubin, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Ms. Bibeau. It's always a pleasure to exchange ideas with you. Canada is following in the heels of others, so I hope that we're going to learn from the experience of those who preceded us. And I'd like to make reference to an article that appeared in a British newspaper called The Guardian, which published the findings of a study that raised the alarm in 2013. According to the article, more than two-thirds of the investment made by the DFI, and we're talking about the British program, went to tax havens. This was a study done by the European Union. I don't want to get into all the details of the examples, but my question to you is, what specific measures do you intend to implement to ensure that our Canadian DFI will not fund an organization that's going to use tax havens? Indeed, we are going to learn from the experiences of other countries. Moreover, we have looked closely at other DFIs. We want to learn from their experience and set ourselves apart as well. And now that the board is being established and the whole governance structure is being established, there are also reference frameworks that the board will set for itself. Earlier, I talked about results. There's a whole issue of ethics, transparency, decision-making. Pardon me, my notes are bilingual here. So there are various frameworks that we have to take into account, and we will learn from the experience of others so that we will not encourage tax havens or tax avoidance. Avoiding it is not the same as prohibiting it. Isn't there any type of formal prohibition or ban in the Act that will prevent this from occurring? The rules are the same. DFI is a subsidiary of EDCs, so all the rules that apply to EDC will also apply to the DFI. Was there something specific for tax havens that will apply to the DFI? So we could get back to you with a more specific answer. The government, with all of our policies, we try to do everything we can to ensure that the tax havens are not involved. We will do everything we can to avoid the situation, but the rules are very clear. We need to avoid that. Thank you for your question, and I'll try to provide you with greater details. We were in the House this week. We were dealing with a subject pertaining to international development. We know that Canada is losing ground in terms of funding ODA. I think we're 0.6% as we speak. So we're well under the agent. We're 0.26. We're well below other OECD countries. And you said that you will use Canada's leadership in order to lever other funds. How can Canada be a country that's demonstrating leadership if we're well under the average when it comes to funding? And our credibility is at stake, and ours is the smallest DFI of all the compared to the others. I didn't say that we were losing ground. No, I'm the one who said that. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. As a result of the consultation that we held over 2 years, if you include my first roundtables, I was asked three things. We need leadership, good policy, and money. Chrystia Freeland and the number 2 person in the World Bank and said, we need leadership from Canada. That's what we really need. They want to have us sitting at all of the tables. And our trademark, the name Canada, has a great deal of value. And we want to use that. And that's what I want to use in order to get new donors. Not just simply displace money, but go out and seek new donors who are not involved in development today. So they're not there right now. This is a wish that you're that you're expressing. It's a direction you want to head in, but Canada doesn't. The fact that the fact that the World Bank for dealing with malaria is an example that shows how Canada can play a leadership role. Other countries want to be with us right now, and I think we need to. We'll do our best. I imagine you'll come back to us on us. This British article also revealed that its DFI invested more than $260 million US in building very expensive residential quarters with gated communities, and that's not doing much to deal with poverty. How will our institution ensure that we're not funding this type of thing? Our goals, our direction is clear. We really want to strike a balance between development and promoting entrepreneurship, but there has to be an impact on women's entrepreneurship and on children. We're dealing with financial service, the agri-food sector. I don't see how a project that deals with wealthy communities or gated communities would have anything to do with RDFI. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, good morning. I've seen firsthand the great work you're doing in Colombia and Guatemala when it comes down to agriculture. But I was looking at the paragraph under background. It says empowering women and young entrepreneurs, but there's no agriculture. Maybe this is my background in agriculture. I'm very keen that the country we invest money in, they should be sustainable when it comes down to food. So what do you have to say about that?
Agriculture, agribusiness is definitely one key element of the policy and of the orientation that we have given to the DFI. So I'm sorry if it's not clear enough in the document. And especially when we talk about women, because, well, I've traveled a lot, and obviously women are really, really engaged in the agricultural business and the informal business. So that DFI might be a good occasion to give them access to financing, to be able to go from the informal market to the formal market, have access to financing, and develop a business, working on the value chain in different ways as well to develop their economically empower women. But the agricultural sector is definitely a key sector for that.
It is, okay.
Oh, yes, it is.
Thank you. Secondly, we're talking huge money under DFI, like trillions of dollars, 3 to 4 trillion at some point. In 2016, there was only 142 billion was disposed of. I know we're going to do our fair share, but how do we encourage the other partners to meet that $3-4 trillion goal someday? Do we have, as a country, any input, any influence, or we're just going to be the leaders coming up with our commitment and the rest of the world follows us? You did mention Scotland and other countries are chipping in, but it's a long way to go. Where do you see we're going with that? The trillions of dollars we anticipate to be spending one day.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that I got your question right, okay? Okay, do you refer to the needs, if we want to reach the SDGs by 2030, we would need between $5 and $7 trillion, while ODA actually is 142. Okay, this is your, okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to be sure. Yeah, this is exactly a reason why we have to give as much as possible through the ODA normal channel, but we have to leverage new money from new partners. And yes, I think Canada has the capacity, the leadership, the brand right now to lead the way, and to lead the way and bring money in the sectors that we think are will make the greatest difference in the field. So this is exactly what I'm working on right now with Ambassador Blanchard at the UN, because Ambassador Blanchard is co-leading a group of friends with his colleague from Jamaica on financing SDGs. And yesterday, Madame Georgieva was here from the World Bank to talk about innovative financing in different ways. So this is really the idea. We want to get, for example, bring the countries from the Gulf region on board, because I think we can find some money over there and get them interested in different sectors of development, and accompany them in this. We want to involve the private sector, and when I talk about the private sector, it's businesses, it's also philanthropists, and even the millenniums. Because I want to re-engage Canadians widely. The DFI is one way to engage the private sector, but in a more general way, it's important to find new friends and new donors for development.
Well, thank you. Well, the private sector is coming up pretty strong. I see they're up to 13 times more than the governments are chipping in. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to encourage the governments around the world to step up to the plate. Thank you. Final question. The committee would be very keen as DFI develops the outcome, the results of the money we spend. Do we have a mechanism in place to know, or are you going to come back every 6 months or a year to let us know how we're making out? Do we have a mechanism in place?
The result framework is being developed now. DFI will officially report to us, to the Parliament, once a year through the EDC, as the EDC does. But there will be a specific report on the DFI.
Okay.
Does it answer your question?
As long as we know if the money is working as we want to around the world, the committee would know the results. That's what my concern is.
Yes, absolutely. They will have to. They're working on the framework. We will stay in touch, and obviously this framework and the results that we are looking for will be directly linked with the SDGs targets and indicators of results, and we don't want to duplicate the work.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sidhu. I think my colleague is also asking about how you will report to Parliament. So I suspect there will be an annual reporting mechanism through the Export Development Agency
Exactly.
as a subsidiary or something of that matter, so that Parliament will be informed of not only the dollars that are spent, but sort of the direction and strategy. Would that be correct?
It will be exactly the same process as EDC right now, but with a specific report on DFI. I would always be open to come back and to talk to you about the progress if this is not enough. Le rapport de DC, c'est seulement sur les chiffres ou il y a un rapport d'activité puis d'orientation aussi?
Il va y avoir une annexe spécialement sur le DFI qui va parler des résultats. Non, des résultats.
Okay, so the report will also include data on results and orientations.
Okay, thank you, Madam Minister. Madam Vanderbilt, please. Her first questions as a new member of our committee.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Bienvenue, Madame la Ministre.
Madam Minister, I'd like to begin by congratulating you and the government for this new ODA policy, because this will make a difference not only for women and girls, but also it will make our ODA much more efficient. I'd like to ask you how the DFI will help countries attain their sustainable development goals, particularly to ODCC, with respect to gender equality. inclusion of women is a very important factor in order to achieve equality. According to the World PA, in developing countries, women are 20% less likely than men to even have a bank account. And yet in these countries, between 30 and 37% of small companies are run by women. So how will this new DFI ensure that the women will benefit, and how can we include this, ensure that this will include marginalized groups, including women? Thank you, and thank you very much for your question in French. So we do have a policy, a feminist policy, and that has to be reflected in our DFI. That's clear. We're going to ensure that in terms of governance that we have the necessarily competence to attract people. So we have the board of directors at ADC. There will be a board of directors for the DFI, and we'll also have an advisory committee. This advisory committee will provide advice to the board of directors, and we will ensure that these people have all of the competence, are competent to deal with these issues, including climate change as well. So we're trying to ensure that in terms of governance that we do have the skill set required. The staff of DFI will have the requisite training in order to have good reflexes and be able to accompany companies so that their projects have an impact on people. And further to that, we want to intervene in specific sectors. We have to consult women locally, and we're going to encourage that this be done so that there is true consultation to ensure that we are dealing with the local needs and needs that we've not only taken into consideration, but we really want to maximize the empowerment of women through these projects. So it has to become something that we do second nature in all sectors in all sectors. And it is desirable, and it's a guarantee of success for the companies that are located there. That is, they'll be able to get women to participate, particularly in developing countries, in terms of entrepreneurship, the reliability of the people that we hire. The women are tend to be more punctual. So this is beneficial for private sectors when they get women involved. In some countries, women cannot own or incorporate themselves without the permission from their husbands. Will the new DFI include financial education and the economic rights of women? It's perhaps not obvious that the DFI will have a direct impact on this, but the DFI is complementary to all of our programs and policies. What you've talked about, that is a priority for our feminist policy, and governance deals with this as well. We want to ensure that the technical assistance we provide to these countries locally will enable them to come up with policies that will take into account their needs. And having an identity, an identity is a very important thing. The right to own something, the right to have a company, that all stems from that. These are subjects that are of concern to us, and they're part of our policies in conjunction with our feminist goals.
Technical assistance, so expertise that we can provide to countries in order to increase the development as well as the private sector investment. Will we be providing things like financial literacy for women, for other marginalized groups that are actually barriers to them being able to start businesses and enter the economy?
Je dirais que c'est plutôt à travers nos programmes.
Say it's through our programming, our development program, that we'll be able to do that. The technical assistance projects will support the projects pertaining to the DFI and entrepreneurship, and it'll go through the department. And these will be projects that will be closely aligned with technical assistance. We will accompany companies that want to do business in Senegal, or that's a type of technical assistance we will be providing. When we talk about enhancing the skill sets of women when it comes to financial matters, this would be a project that would be bilateral in natural, and it's part and parcel of our priorities.
Déjà des projets de ce genre qui sont en cours avec Desjardins.
We already have such projects that are currently underway.
A few minutes late, we had a bit of a room mix-up on my end. I wanted to ask you, maybe you anticipated this question for me, just a little bit about Canada's aid to Burma. We've had a lot of discussion recently about the crisis affecting the Rohingya, and I know that there have been some initiatives around assistance to Rohingya refugees in other countries, but I'd like to hear about Canada's aid within Burma itself. I was looking over some background on this. I'd be curious if you have a bit more information on support to decentralized governance in Burma, which was provided through the Forum of Federations, what the mechanism for that exactly is, and how that's going in light of the problems. And a secondary question on that, there was an announcement, I think, a year and a half ago of around $40 million for democratic development. I'm just wondering if that goes through your department or if that goes directly through Foreign Affairs, because I'd be curious for some more information, but maybe you're not the right person to ask. So if you know about that, what's happening with that as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Donc pour le projet...
For Myanmar, the humanitarian assistance that we've been providing since the beginning of the year is $9.18 million since August 25th, when the crisis first surfaced. As I had an opportunity to mention on Tuesday evening in the House, I'd like to reassure you that the money was not given directly to the departments or to the government, so that it wasn't, we wanted to ensure it wasn't going to be diverted. We gave this money to partners who were reliable. In all honesty, I prepared for the DFI, so I don't have all the details with respect to this issue. I think Ms. Freeland would be the person to provide you with greater detail, because these are files that get passed back and forth between our office. What about development, democratic development? I'll get back to you with more details about this specific project in Myanmar. And there was a second part of your question that I missed.
Respect to there was funding delivered through the Forum for Federations, support to decentralized governance in Burma. I understand that these recent proposals are all not government-to-government aid. They work through partners. Of course, there's still a lot of challenges delivering aid to Burma in the current situation. In any event, even getting humanitarian access to Rakhine is there a review going on in terms of recognizing the challenges of delivering this aid, trying to do it in a different way, or are you satisfied that the current structures are still working to get aid to, including to those most vulnerable?
Well, I'm satisfied with the way we work within the context that we have. I'm definitely not satisfied with the access we have in the field. Right. This is for sure. So this is why we have condemned very strongly what's happening. We are advocating for free and access to humanitarian workers and humanitarian assistance, that's for sure. We're working with the partners who have the access. Actually, right now in Myanmar, there's only La Croix-Rouge Internationale, who can, well, somehow access, but very limited access, as we all know. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely not
Great.
happy
Okay.
with this.
Thank you. A bit of a different vein. There's some discussion earlier about getting help to the most vulnerable around the world. I read a really eye-opening book over the summer about development assistance that was making the argument that one of the biggest challenges affecting the poor around the world is basic access to justice. And it's something outside of our frame of reference often, but that many poor people around the world, one of the biggest challenges they face is their land can be taken away from them, people can be forced into bonded labor, and they don't have an effective ability to take that to a sympathetic police force. Maybe it's an issue of lack of prosecutors, lack of police training. I've become convinced through that and some subsequent reading I've done that this is a fundamental problem. That if you want people to start businesses, to gain skills, be able to move forward, they have to have some degree of certainty that when they make investments in themselves and their property, that they're going to actually be able to hang on to those investments and not have them taken away from them. So I'd be curious for your thoughts on that and what, if anything, the Government of Canada is doing around these issues of access to justice for the poor in the developing world.
I totally agree with you. This is a very important issue. Just to give you two examples, in Haiti, we have a very significant project in terms of training police officers for them, and this training includes includes gender-based violence behavior, the way they act. I was in DRC recently. I visited what we call the One Stop Project. So we were giving to women affected by who were victims of violence, obviously medical assistance, psychosocial assistance, but also access to justice through a lawyer and through a police officer. And some of them were able to send the perpetrator in jail. This is one part. You talked about the importance of having this confidence in the system to make investment. This is absolutely essential. And once again, in our governance, the sector of the feminist policy, this is also something that we are working on because if we want economic growth, we have to provide investors the confidence that they can trust the system. So this is something we are working on this way in our governance part. But DFI, the project that will be submitted to the DFI will definitely start where they have a certain level of confidence in the system.
Thank you, Mr. Chenis. We'll go to Mr. Wisniewski, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for appearing before the committee today. And I'll have a series of questions which go to the structure and the how we intend to actually deliver in the field. But let me start off by saying it's actually tremendously encouraging to see this initiative and to see that it's actually being done within the framework of the EDC. EDC's an example of doing important and good work, a rare example, important good work, and also EDC contributes back to the Treasury to the tune of $800 million last year, which certainly allows us with the opportunity to turn around and say, okay, there are other areas that we can do good work such as this. And it also uses the framework of the EDC, which, as you said, allows us to launch without having to duplicate, add unnecessary layers of bureaucracy, and reinvent what's already been put in place. Having said that, there are many countries have similar programs, and there are very different models. Do we have, first of all, a list of countries? Because, for instance, the U.S. does its work in 160 countries. Other countries have target countries, and they may only do it in a score of countries. So do we have a prioritized list? And if we do we have a prioritized list which breaks down between countries that, for instance, are war zones? Iraq, Afghanistan. Do we intend to do work in those sorts of countries? Are there countries that are conflict zones that we intend to do work? Somalia, for instance. And are there countries that are post-conflict, like Angola? And how do we prioritize amongst those countries? Also, there are several models of how these DFIs function. Some tie it back to in-country companies and have a requirement that, for instance, the Brits don't require British companies to be involved. The Belgians, Finns, and Danes actually require that Danish, Belgian, and Finnish countries be involved. And it's an interesting question because it goes back to some of the comments that were made previously about offshores and extraterritoriality. If the model is that 100% can go to in those countries, extrajudiciality, we don't have access to go to the courts to chase after this money, but if Canadian entities are involved, first of all, there's a different government structure often, and we have that ability. So it's a series of questions along those lines of how we intend to structure this. And then a final question, because I know the briefings talked about small and medium-sized businesses, what portion will go to microfinancing? Some of the and the model in that particular case would be quite different, because most likely that would be 100% all local. And some of the greatest success has been with microfinancing in agriculture. And when you do a gender-based analysis, it is so empowering for women in some of the poorest of countries, and there's a little chance that that money will end up in some offshore. So a series of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first question, list of countries. First, to be only the countries eligible to ODA are on the list first. We don't have lists of we haven't made a priority list. We're talking about business. Still, we want to bring investors to do business in developing countries. So we will be, I think, more responsive in the choice of the countries, but still having, we wouldn't want the full DFI going only to middle-income countries. We want to have an impact on the poorest and the most vulnerable. So some of the least developed countries should benefit from our DFI, and we will be proactive on this to have a reasonable share in least developed countries. We also recognize that in the middle-income countries, we have big pockets of poverty as well. So we can still have a big impact on poverty and inequalities if we invest in middle-income countries. So once again, it's finding the right balance. In crisis-affected countries, I guess we'll see the reaction and the interest and the project that will be presented to us. But I wouldn't say that we would be proactive in this area specifically. And when I say we, it's still the DFI in an independent way. But I mean, in our orientation, I definitely want the least developed countries to be significantly included, but not exclusive. Because once again, we want to find the right balance between having an impact on development and being financially sustainable. Canadian companies, it will not be a prerequisite, but once again, we want to use EDC's expertise and Canadian network to encourage, to be proactive, to outreach with Canadian companies to get into it. So it's not exclusive, but we will work hard to have Canadian businesses involved and benefit from the DFI. SMEs, I see it from two sides, from the Canadian, or let's say Canadian SMEs. I think definitely there are business opportunities in developing countries for them, but as well SMEs in developing countries who are also eligible to the DFI. And when you talk about the microfinancing, I refer maybe to my answer to Anita a bit earlier. There's definitely a significant impact on development if we economically empower women through microfinancing. And the DFI wouldn't be doing the microfinancing itself, but supporting your project, which is providing microfinancing to local organization, is definitely one area we want to look at.
Thank you very much, Wisniewski. And Minister, I want to say thank you to you. This wraps up our opportunity to hear directly from you on where we're headed on DFI. I think you've got the sense that our colleagues here all are very supportive of the concept of DFI and what it can do, and are looking forward to continuing involvement in seeing where this all goes over the long term. So I want to thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to ask some questions, and we'll be submitting a report, as you know, to you and to the government on our sense of the DFI, what we've heard from the witnesses over the last while. So again, on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you very much for making this presentation. Colleagues, before I wrap up, because of the event that's going outside, we ask everyone to go out this door if you're leaving, and that means everyone else who's here in the room, simply because there's a reception out that door there, and we would appreciate if you would go out this door in order that you don't end up at the reception unintendedly, if we can put it that way. Unintendedly. Thank you very much, Madam Minister, and we look forward to further events. Colleagues, we'll take a break and be back in 5 minutes.